I saw my worst nightmare standing right in front of me. Not a shadow, not a dream, but real life smirking at me like she owned my life. It wasn't fire or storm or tragedy that took away my peace. No, it was Karen from the HOA. She stood there blocking my boat, blocking my freedom. And with that cold little smile, she whispered the words, "I'll never forget. This access is no longer yours." In that moment, my nightmare had a face. And she had no idea what was coming next. The morning was too quiet. The lake stretched out like glass, not a ripple, not a whisper of wind. Normally that kind of stillness feels peaceful, almost holy. But that day it felt like something heavy pressing down on my chest. My boat, the boat I worked years for, rocked gently in the water, waiting for me. But I couldn't reach it, not anymore. Between me and the water was a chain, a lock. And Karen, the gatekeeper of misery. You ever have a moment where time slows down? Where the words someone says echo like they're carved into stone? That's what it felt like. She didn't yell. She didn't make a scene. She didn't have to. It smirked at all the talking. And as much as I wanted to scream, as much as I wanted to tear that lock off right there, I didn't. I just stared at her, holding my coffee in my hand so tight. The ceramic almost cracked, and I thought, this isn't the end. This is the beginning, because people like her people who think they own the world, 'cause they hold a clipboard or a title, they always overreach. They take and take and take, and one day they take too much, and that's when everything collapses. First few days after she blocked the access, I walked around like a storm cloud. My neighbors noticed. Some shook their heads, some whispered, and some told me to just let it go. Let it go. Let go of what I worked for. Let go of the only thing that gave me peace. Let go of the freedom that kept me alive when life tried. To drown me? No, that wasn't an option. Every time I looked out my window and saw that boat sitting there, untouched, unreachable, it was like looking at a caged animal, something that was born to be free, trapped by arrogance. And each time, I saw it. The anger grew heavier in my chest. I'd sit at my table at night, staring at papers, at rules, at the nonsense Karen had scribbled together to justify her new regulations. Nothing legal about it, nothing fair, just her flexing her power, daring me to push back. But here's the thing. Silence can be louder than shouting. And I chose silence not because I was scared, but because I was waiting, watching. Every time Karen strutted past my property with her little smirk, every time she made some passive-aggressive comment to another neighbor about people who don't follow the rules, I reminded myself. Patience. The louder she got, the closer she was to making a mistake, and mistakes, well, they're always fatal to people who build their power on fear. But patience doesn't mean peace. Patience is fire in your chest that doesn't go out. Patience is lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, clenching your teeth until your jaw aches. Patience is watching someone spit on your dignity while you wait for the right moment to stand up. And let me tell you, patience nearly broke me. There were nights I wanted to storm out there, rip that lock off and scream in her face until the whole neighborhood heard me. There were mornings I woke up ready to move my boat by force, daring her to stop me, but each time something held me back. Something told me the story wasn't ready to end yet, and I was right. Because while she was busy building walls around me, Karen was also building her own little empire. And she thought it was untouchable. Her pride and joy, the restaurant. She never shut up about it. Every meeting, every conversation, she'd slip it in. My restaurant, we do things the right way. That's why my restaurant is so successful, because I know how to run things. She wore that restaurant like a crown, bragging about how it was the heart of the community, how everyone who mattered came through her doors. She thought it made her untouchable. She thought it gave her leverage over everyone. Pride like that blinds you. And when you're blinded by pride, you don't see the fire creeping up behind you. And me, I saw it. Oh, I saw it. The shift started small, almost invisible. A neighbor whispered to me that Karen's business wasn't doing as well as she claimed, that behind the polished front, cracks were showing. I brushed it off at first, but then I noticed things. Fewer cars in her parking lot. A waiter standing outside, staring at his phone, looking bored because no one was coming in. Karen's smile looking a little tighter each time she bragged, her voice a little more desperate when she mentioned busy weekends. I can't lie, watching that gave me a kind of satisfaction I hadn't felt in weeks. Not because I wanted her ruined, but because it reminded me of something important. She wasn't invincible. She wasn't a queen. She was just a person, holding on to power with weak fingers, and weak fingers can't hold on forever. Still, the anger never left me. Each day that lock stayed on my dock, each day my boat sat waiting like a prisoner, it cut me deeper. I started waking up earlier, pacing the shoreline, watching the sun rise over water I couldn't touch. And with every sunrise, the bitterness grew heavier. One morning I remember standing there, hands in my pockets, and whispering to myself, she took away the one thing that gave me peace. Why does she think she can do this? And maybe that's the question I want to ask you too. If someone stripped away your freedom, if someone blocked the thing that kept you alive, how far would you let them go?
What would you do?
Would you fight? Would you stay quiet? Would you find another way? Drop it in the comments and, well, you're at it. Tell me where you're watching from, because I want to know how people everywhere see this. Because here's the truth. It's easy to say you'd fight back. But when you're in it, when you're staring down your nightmare, it feels like the air's been sucked out of your lungs. And yet even in that suffocation, something inside me burned. And that's when I realized something chilling. Karen hadn't just locked my gate. She had unlocked something inside me, something I hadn't felt in years, the will to fight. You see, nightmares aren't just things that scare you, they're things that reveal you. And in facing her, I began to see myself clearly again, not as a victim, not as someone she could crush, but as someone who could rise, no matter how hard she tried to push me down. And little did she know, while she thought she was winning, her own world was already starting to crumble. When you face someone who takes something from you, it's not just about what they stole, it's about what it reveals inside you. And by the time the second week rolled around, I wasn't just angry, I was awake in a way I hadn't been in years. But Karen, she was blind. Blind to the fact that her own little kingdom was crumbling right under her nose. She strutted through the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, shoulders back like a soldier marching to war. She barked at kids for riding bikes too fast, sent fines to families for leaving their trash bins out too long, and acted as if locking my dock was some kind of grand victory. But I noticed something she didn't want anyone to see. Her eyes, they weren't smug anymore. They were tired. Faint circles under them, a twitch in her jaw when she thought no one was watching. For all her arrogance, she was holding something heavy, and that weight was about to crush her. Because the truth is, her restaurant, her pride, her crown was slipping through her fingers. I remember the first time I saw the cracks clear as day. I was driving past one evening, the kind of evening where the sky was painted orange and pink and everything looked alive, but not her restaurant. The parking lot was almost empty. The big neon sign that used to buzz proudly flickered like a dying candle. And for the first time, I saw Karen herself, not as a ruler, but as a woman standing at the door of a sinking ship. She was talking to one of her staff, her voice sharp, her arms flailing. Desperation written all over her. It hit me then. Her empire wasn't as untouchable as she wanted us all to believe. And the same fire she lit in me when she chained my boat was now starting to eat away at her life. But life is strange, isn't it? Sometimes you watch your enemies struggle, and you feel a satisfaction you can't even explain. Yet at the same time, there's this voice in your head asking, what does this mean for me? Because while her world was slipping, mine was still chained. My boat still sat there every morning, rocking gently in the water, out of reach, and it ate at me more each day. It's funny how small things can drive you insane. The sound of water lapping against the dock, the sight of sunlight dancing on the waves, it should have been peace. But to me, it was torture. One night I couldn't sleep. I went outside, barefoot, and stood by the gate she had locked. The moon was high, the lake silver, everything so quiet it almost felt unreal. I pressed my hand against the cold metal lock and I swear I could feel my own heartbeat in it. Rage, sorrow, everything I'd bottled up throbbed in my chest. I whispered to myself, she took my freedom. She thought she broke me, but then I shook my head, because she hadn't. If anything, she woke me up the next morning, Karen showed. Up again, clipboard, fake smile, that same holier-than-thou attitude. But this time, she wasn't there to gloat. She was there to beg, not to me, but to another neighbor. I overheard her voice carrying through the air as she pleaded for them. To host some community dinner at a restaurant. Her words were sharp, but her tone cracked. She was desperate for business, desperate to fill those empty tables, and I couldn't help but think, so this is what it looks like when power slips away. But even then, even with her life unraveling, she never backed down on me. She never unlocked that gate, not once, and that told me something. It wasn't about rules. It wasn't about regulations. It was about control. Wanted me to kneel. She wanted to prove she had power over me. And that realization lit another fire inside me. If she wasn't going to bend, neither was I. Now here's the twist you don't expect. Around that same time, rumors started spreading. Not just whispers about her restaurant, but darker ones. People said health inspectors had visited, said the kitchen wasn't as clean as she claimed, said maybe, just maybe, the pride she carried was rotting from the inside. And suddenly, the whole neighborhood was watching. Not just me. Everyone. Because when a person builds their power on fear, the second they stumble, the crowd that once bowed to them starts to lift their heads. And that's exactly what I saw. People who used to avoid her gaze now spoke her name openly. Families who once obeyed her every rule now rolled their eyes when she passed. The cracks weren't just in her restaurant, they were in her kingdom. And yet, in all of this, she still found time to torment me. One afternoon I caught her standing by my dock, staring at my boat as if it offended her. But her jaw clenched, her arms crossed, her whole body radiating bitterness. I walked down toward her, slow, steady, and when our eyes met, I saw it clearly. Fear. She'd never admit it, but it was there. Because here's the thing about nightmares, they go both ways. To me, she was the monster. But to her, I had become the storm she couldn't control. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the glow of the lake outside my window. I realized something. This wasn't just about me and Karen anymore. This was about everyone she'd stepped on, everyone she'd controlled, everyone she'd silenced. And whether she knew it or not, the tide was turning. So let me ask you this. Have you ever watched someone who once looked untouchable begin to fall apart? Have you ever seen the cracks in their armor appear and thought, maybe justice really does exist? If you've felt that, you know the mix of emotions I'm talking about. Bitterness, satisfaction, and something else too, a strange kind of hope. Because as I looked out over that lake, I knew something. Her fire was coming. And when it burned, it wouldn't just scorch her. It would change everything. Drop me a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. And tell me if you've ever seen power collapse right in front of your eyes. Because that moment, that shift, it's something you never forget. The night it happened, the air felt different. Heavy. Like the whole world was holding its breath. I didn't know why at first. Couldn't explain it. But sometimes your gut knows something before your mind does. And that night, my gut twisted like a storm was brewing, not over the lake. Not in the sky, but in her world. I was sitting at my table, staring out the window at the boat I still couldn't touch. When the first sound reached me, sirens, distant. At first, then growing louder, it's the kind of sound that makes your chest tighten, because you know it's not coming for nothing. And then I saw it. Orange glow rising above the trees in the direction of her restaurant. Flames. I froze. For a second I thought I was imagining it. Then the smoke curled upward, black against the stars, thick and angry. The sirens wailed closer, louder, until they drowned out every other sound. And in that moment I realized Karen's crown, her pride, her empire. It was burning. I didn't rush over. I just stood there on my porch, hands gripping the railing, heart pounding as the night lit up with fire. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had locked away my freedom, chained down my peace, tried to control me. Now the one thing she thought. She controlled most of the things she bragged about. Endlessly was slipping into ash right before her eyes. When I finally walked down the road toward the crowd gathering near the restaurant, the scene hit me like a punch. Flames clawed at the roof, glass shattered, the heat radiating so strong I could feel it on my face from across the street. Firefighters shouted, hoses blasted water, and through the chaos I saw her, Karen, standing there on the curb, eyes wide. Arms limp at her sides, her face pale like she'd seen a ghost. She wasn't barking orders. She wasn't smirking. She wasn't the queen anymore. She was just human, fragile, broken. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because here's the truth. When someone builds their life on control, on fear, on crushing others just to stand taller, the fire isn't what destroys them. It's the emptiness left behind when their throne turns to dust. And looking at her that night, with the flames reflecting in her eyes, I saw someone who had finally realized she wasn't invincible. But don't get me wrong, I didn't cheer, I didn't clap, because fire doesn't bring peace. It brings silence and silence. It leaves you thinking. I walked back home under the glow of those flames, the sirens still echoing in the distance. And when I reached my dock, when I stood there in front of that same lock she had slapped on my gate, I laughed. Not a loud laugh, not a cruel laugh, just a tired one. Because in that moment, I realized something important. She could take away my access. She could chain my boat. She could try to crush my spirit, but she couldn't stop life from balancing the scales. The next morning, the whole neighborhood buzzed with whispers. People spoke Karen's name differently now, no longer in fear, but in pity. No longer with respect, but with relief. It was as if the fire had burned away her power along with the walls of her restaurant. And yet, the gate remained locked. She hadn't touched it. Even after losing everything else, she held on to that last shred of control, as if keeping me chained somehow meant she still mattered. I walked down to the dock that day, stood there with my coffee in hand, and stared at the lock one last time. My nightmare. My cage. My reminder of everything she tried to do, and I whispered, "You can keep it, because you already lost." See, sometimes the real victory isn't in forcing someone to unlock the gate. Sometimes it's in watching them realize the power they thought they had was never real to begin with. And that's the part I want you to think about. We all face our own Karens in life, people who block us, chain us, try to steal our freedom because it makes them feel powerful. But in the end, their fire always comes. Maybe not in flames. Maybe not in smoke. But in one way or another, life always has a way of balancing the scales. So I'll ask you again. If someone tried to chain your freedom, someone became your worst nightmare, what would you do? Would you fight? Would you wait? Or would you let the fire burn on its own? Tell me in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, because I want to know how people everywhere carry their storms, how they survive their nightmares. As for me, I stood there watching the sun rise over the lake, the water shimmering gold. My boat still rocked gently, waiting. The lock still hung heavy, stubborn. But for the first time in weeks, I felt free. Because sometimes freedom isn't about breaking chains. Sometimes freedom is knowing the nightmare can't touch you anymore.